Desperate to save her daughter's life, a single mother takes on the impossible, offering herself directly to the most powerful man in the city, a tycoon shrouded in mystery and wealth. But when she finally discovers who this man truly is, it feels as though the ground vanishes beneath her feet. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the tiny bedroom, illuminating the worry lines etched deep into Hannah Stone's face. At 32, she looked older than her years, the weight of single motherhood and financial struggles aging her prematurely. Her fingers, calloused from years of waitressing and odd jobs, gently stroked the forehead of her sleeping daughter, Elise. 6-year-old Elise lay peacefully, her golden curls splayed across the pillow like a halo. In sleep, she looked like any other child, carefree and full of promise. But Hannah knew better. Beneath that angelic exterior lurked a ticking time bomb, a rare genetic disorder that threatened to steal her daughter's future. Hannah's mind drifted back to that fateful day 3 months ago when their world had shattered. The sterile hospital room, the sympathetic look in Dr. Patel's eyes, the incomprehensible medical jargon that boiled down to one devastating truth. Without an experimental treatment available only in New York, Elise's life expectancy could be measured in months, not years. "Ms. Stone," Dr. Patel had said, his voice gentle but firm, "I won't sugarcoat this. The treatment Elise needs is cutting edge and, unfortunately, extremely expensive. We're talking about a price tag in the millions." Hannah had felt the floor drop out from beneath her. Millions? She could barely make rent on their tiny apartment in Queens. How could she possibly hope to afford a treatment that cost more than she'd earn in several lifetimes? As she sat by Elise's bedside, Hannah's resolve hardened. She would move heaven and earth for her daughter. Nothing else mattered. The next few weeks became a blur of desperate activity. Hannah took on extra shifts at the diner, her feet aching and her smile forced as she served entitled Wall Street types who thought nothing of dropping hundreds on a single meal. She spent her nights hunched over her laptop, researching charities, filling out grant applications, and launching crowdfunding campaigns. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The rejections piled up, each one a knife to Hannah's heart. The charities were sympathetic but overextended. The grants had thousands of applicants for a handful of spots. And while friends and neighbors gave what they could to the crowdfunding campaign, their generosity barely made a dent in the astronomical sum needed. Hannah's desperation grew with each passing day. She could see the toll the disease was taking on Elise, the increasing fatigue, the loss of appetite, the occasional tremors in her small hands. Time was running out. It was during one of her late-night research sessions, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer determination, that Hannah first came across the name Logan Hayes. The article showcased his latest tech innovation, some groundbreaking AI that was set to revolutionize the medical field. But it wasn't the technology that caught Hannah's attention. It was the number attached to Hayes' name. Net worth estimated at $12.7 billion. Hannah's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she dug deeper. Logan Hayes, 35, CEO of Hayes Tech, a self-made billionaire who had clawed his way up from a middle-class background to become one of the youngest and most influential tech moguls in the country. Known for his brilliant mind, his cutthroat business tactics, and his aversion to the public eye. There was something else about him, though. Something in the hard set of his jaw, in the few photos available, in the clipped responses he gave in rare interviews. A coldness, perhaps, or pain. Hannah shook her head, dismissing the thought. What did it matter what kind of man Logan Hayes was? He had money, more money than she could fathom, money that could save Elise. The idea came to her slowly, forming in the back of her mind like a desperate whisper. At first she pushed it away, appalled at herself, but as the days wore on and Elise grew weaker, the whisper became a shout, drowning out all other considerations. She would offer herself to Logan Hayes, her companionship, her body if necessary, in exchange for the money to save Elise. The very thought made her stomach churn. Hannah had always prided herself on her independence, on never compromising her values no matter how tough things got. But this was Elise's life. And for Elise, there was nothing Hannah wouldn't do. The plan crystallized over the following days. Hannah learned that Hayes would be attending a charity gala in Manhattan the following week. It was her chance, perhaps her only chance. She called in every favor she had, borrowing a designer dress from a friend who worked in fashion, another friend agreeing to watch Elise for the evening. Hannah spent hours in front of the mirror, applying makeup with shaking hands, trying to transform herself into someone worthy of a billionaire's attention. As she stood in front of her cracked, full-length mirror, Hannah barely recognized herself. The woman staring back at her looked elegant, almost beautiful, but her eyes were those of a hunted animal, desperate and afraid. "It's just one night," Hannah whispered to her reflection. "One night to save a lifetime." She leaned down to kiss her sleeping Elise goodbye, inhaling the sweet scent of her daughter's hair. "Mommy loves you, sweetheart," she murmured, "more than anything in this world." With a final glance at her daughter, Hannah straightened her shoulders and walked out of their apartment. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she made her way to the waiting taxi, each step taking her closer to Logan Hayes and the salvation he represented. As the taxi wove through the congested streets of New York, Hannah's mind raced. How would she approach him? What would she say? The thought of propositioning a stranger made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to focus on Elise, on those golden curls, that infectious laugh, the future that was slipping away with each passing moment. The taxi pulled up in front of the opulent hotel where the gala was being held. Hannah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had no invitation, no right to be here among New York's elite, but she had a mother's determination, and that would have to be enough. As she stepped out onto the red carpet, the flashes of paparazzi cameras momentarily blinded her. Hannah blinked rapidly, her heart pounding. This was it. Somewhere in that glittering ballroom was Logan Hayes, the man who held Elise's fate in his hands. With trembling legs but unwavering resolve, Hannah Stone took her first step towards the unknown, towards hope, towards Logan Hayes. The opulent ballroom of the Plaza Hotel buzzed with the chatter of New York's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Hannah Stone stood at the entrance, her borrowed dress suddenly feeling like a child's costume. She scanned the room, her heart racing as she searched for one face among the hundreds, and then she saw him. Logan Hayes stood near the bar, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking every inch the billionaire mogul. His tailored suit probably cost more than Hannah's yearly rent, but it wasn't his obvious wealth that caught her attention. It was his eyes, steel gray and cold, surveying the room with detached boredom. Hannah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. It was now or never. She began to make her way across the room, weaving through clusters of laughing guests. With each step, she repeated her daughter's name in her mind like a mantra. Elise, Elise, Elise. As she approached, Logan's gaze fell on her. For a split second, something flickered in those gray eyes. Recognition, shock, disbelief. But it was gone so quickly, Hannah thought she must have imagined it. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Hannah Stone. I need to speak with you." Logan's eyebrow arched slightly, the only indication that he'd heard her. "I don't do business at social events, Mrs. Stone," he said, his voice cool and dismissive. Hannah felt a flare of desperation. She hadn't come this far to be brushed off. "Please," she said, lowering her voice. "It's not about business. It's about my daughter. She's dying." Something in her tone must have reached him because Logan's expression shifted subtly. He glanced around the room, then nodded towards a secluded alcove. "5 minutes," he said curtly. As they moved away from the crowd, Hannah's rehearsed speech deserted her. How did one ask a stranger for millions of dollars? How did one offer oneself in exchange? Logan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Well?" he prompted. Hannah took a deep breath. "My daughter, Elise, she's 6 years old. She has a rare genetic disorder. There's a treatment, but it's experimental, expensive, millions of dollars expensive." She paused, gathering her courage. I'm here to make you an offer, Mr. Hayes. In exchange for the money to save my daughter, I'll give you me, my companionship, my body, if that's what you want, for as long as you want." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and irretrievable. Hannah's cheeks burned with shame, but she forced herself to meet Logan's gaze. For a long moment, Logan said nothing. His face remained impassive, but something stormy brewed in his eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. "Do you know who I am, Hannah?" The use of her first name startled her. "You're Logan Hayes," she said, confusion coloring her tone. "The tech billionaire." A bitter smile twisted Logan's lips. "No," he said softly. "Look at me, Hannah. Really look." Frowning, Hannah studied his face. The sharp jawline, the slightly crooked nose that looked like it had been broken once, the small scar at his left temple, and those eyes. Suddenly, the years fell away, and Hannah was looking at a different face, younger, softer, full of love and promise. Emmy, the childhood nickname, fell from Logan's lips, heavy with emotion. Hannah staggered back, her mind reeling. Luke, she whispered, using the name she'd known him by all those years ago. But how? I don't understand. Logan's face hardened, the vulnerability disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Clearly, he said, his voice cold once more. You didn't recognize me at all, did you? The boy you left without a word, without an explanation. The boy who loved you. Hannah's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and shock. Luke. Her Luke was Logan Hayes? The same boy she'd grown up with, shared her dreams with, fallen in love with as a teenager? The boy who had disappeared from her life so abruptly, leaving her heartbroken and alone? I didn't leave you, she said, her voice shaking. You left me. You just vanished. Logan's laugh was harsh and humorless. Is that what you told yourself? Is that how you justified cutting me out of your life completely? Before Hannah could respond, Logan held up a hand. You know what? It doesn't matter. Ancient history. He fixed her with a hard stare. You came here with a proposition, Hannah. Against my better judgment, I'm going to accept. Hannah blinked, struggling to keep up with the rapid turn of events. You will? Yes, Logan said, his tone businesslike. I'll pay for your daughter's treatment, every penny. But my condition is this. You'll move in with me, into my penthouse, for as long as I say. But why? Hannah asked, bewildered. Logan's smile was cold. Let's call it curiosity. I want to know what kind of woman Hannah Stone grew up to be. The kind who'd sell herself to a stranger? Or the kind who'd abandon the person who loved her most in the world? He paused, his gaze boring into her. Do we have a deal? Hannah's head spun. This was all too much. The shock of recognition, the accusations she didn't understand, the offer that was everything she'd hoped for, and yet so much more complicated than she'd imagined. But through it all, one thought remained clear. Elise. This was for Elise. Yes, she said finally. We have a deal. The next few days passed in a blur. Logan's efficiency was breathtaking. Within hours of their agreement, Elise was admitted to the top children's hospital in New York, a team of specialists assembled to oversee her treatment. Hannah's head swam with medical jargon and consent forms, but through it all, one thing was clear. Her daughter had hope. As Elise settled into the hospital for the first phase of her treatment, Hannah prepared to fulfill her end of the bargain. She packed up their meager belongings from their Queen's apartment, said goodbye to confused neighbors, and steeled herself for the unknown. Logan's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek skyscraper in Manhattan. As the private elevator whisked Hannah upwards, her stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, revealing a space that seemed to be made entirely of glass and steel, and breathtaking views of the city. Logan stood in the center of the vast living room, his posture rigid, his face a mask of indifference. Your room is upstairs, he said without preamble. You'll find everything you need there. I've taken the liberty of having some clothes delivered for you. I assume the few things you brought won't be suitable. Hannah bristled at the implied insult, but bit back a retort. This was the deal she'd made. Thank you, she said stiffly. I appreciate your generosity. Logan's laugh was short and humorless. Generosity? Is that what you call it? He turned away, moving towards what looked like a home office. I have work to do. Feel free to explore the penthouse. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. With that, he was gone, leaving Hannah alone in the cavernous space. She made her way upstairs, finding a bedroom larger than her entire apartment. The closet was filled with designer clothes, tags still attached. The bed was enormous, covered in silky sheets that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Hannah sank onto the bed, the events of the past few days crashing over her. She'd gotten what she wanted. Elise would get her treatment. But at what cost? She was living in the home of a man she'd once loved, a man who now looked at her with barely concealed contempt, a man she barely recognized. Over the next few weeks, a tense routine developed. Hannah spent her days at the hospital with Elise, overseeing her treatment, her heart soaring with each positive report from the doctors. In the evenings, she returned to the penthouse, to silent, uncomfortable dinners with Logan. He was an enigma, this new Logan. In public, he was the charming, confident CEO, dazzling investors and journalists alike. But in the privacy of the penthouse, he was cold, distant. His words, when he deigned to speak to Hannah, laced with sarcasm and bitter undertones. Yet there were moments, fleeting, blink and you'll miss them moments, when Hannah caught glimpses of the boy she'd known, the way his brow furrowed when he was deep in thought, the half-smile that sometimes graced his lips when he read something amusing on his tablet. In those moments, her heart ached for what they'd lost, for the years that stretched between them like an unbridgeable chasm. One evening, about a month into their arrangement, Hannah returned from the hospital later than usual. A minor complication with Elise's treatment had kept her at the hospital well past dinner time. She entered the penthouse quietly, expecting Logan to be working or already retired for the night. Instead, she found him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of scotch in his hand, staring out at the glittering cityscape. He turned at the sound of her entrance, and Hannah was struck by the raw vulnerability in his eyes. For a moment he looked lost, almost young. "You're late," he said, but the usual bite was missing from his tone. "I'm sorry," Hannah replied softly. "There was an issue with Elise's treatment." "Nothing serious," she added quickly, seeing the flash of concern in his eyes. "Just took some extra time to sort out." Logan nodded, turning back to the window. After a moment of hesitation, Hannah moved to stand beside him. The city sprawled before them, a tapestry of lights and shadows. "Do you remember?" Logan said suddenly, his voice low. "The night we snuck out to watch the meteor shower. We climbed up to the water tower, and you were so scared you'd fall." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "You held my hand the whole time," she whispered. "You said you'd never let me fall." Logan's grip tightened on his glass. "I meant it," he said, so quietly Hannah almost didn't hear him. Then, as if catching himself, he straightened, his face closing off once more. "It's late. You should get some rest." As he brushed past her, Hannah caught a whiff of his cologne, the same one he'd worn as a teenager. The scent hit her like a physical blow, memories flooding back. Summer nights, stolen kisses, promises of forever. What had happened to them? The question burned in Hannah's mind as she prepared for bed. Logan clearly believed she had abandoned him, but she remembered it differently. She remembered waiting for him day after day, until finally accepting that he was gone. As she lay in bed that night, Hannah's mind churned with unanswered questions. Who was telling the truth? What had really happened all those years ago? And more pressingly, could they ever bridge the gulf of hurt and misunderstanding that lay between them? With a sigh, Hannah turned over, punching her pillow in frustration. She was here for Elise, she reminded herself sternly. Her daughter's life was what mattered, not some long-buried teenage romance. And yet, as she drifted off to sleep, it was Logan's face she saw, not the hard, successful man he'd become, but the gentle boy who'd once promised to never let her fall. The weeks that followed were a strange dance of avoidance and tension, punctuated by moments of unexpected vulnerability. Logan began to orchestrate situations that seemed designed to test Hannah's memory of their shared past, each one more elaborate than the last. One morning, Hannah came down to breakfast to find the kitchen table set with a checkered cloth, a jar of wildflowers in the center. Logan sat there casually reading a newspaper as if this was perfectly normal. "What's all this?" Hannah asked, confusion evident in her voice. Logan looked up, his expression unreadable. "Breakfast," he said simply. "I felt like a change." But as Hannah sat down, the scent hit her. Fresh baked cinnamon rolls, just like the ones they used to steal from Mrs. Abernathy's windowsill on lazy summer mornings. Her eyes widened, meeting Logan's intense gaze. "These smell just like—" she began, then stopped herself. Logan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Like what?" he prompted, his tone deceptively light. Hannah hesitated. "Like home," she finished lamely, reaching for a roll to cover her discomfort. As she bit into the pastry, flavors exploded on her tongue, transporting her back to those carefree days of her youth. She could almost feel the warm sun on her face, hear Logan's carefree laugh as they ran from Mrs. Abernathy's indignant shouts. Logan watched her closely, his eyes never leaving her face. "Good," he asked, his voice low. Hannah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and shared memories. Finally, Logan stood abruptly. "I have a meeting," he said, his tone businesslike once more. "Enjoy your breakfast." As he strode out of the kitchen, Hannah was left with the lingering scent of cinnamon and confusion swirling in her mind. These moments of déjà vu became more frequent. A bouquet of wildflowers appeared in Hannah's room, the same variety that used to grow in the meadow behind her childhood home. Logan suggested they watch an old movie one evening, the very same film they'd seen on their first unofficial date at the local drive-in. Each time, Hannah felt the stirrings of recognition, the pull of shared history. But confusion and hurt held her back. This wasn't the Logan she knew. The boy she'd loved would never be so cold, so calculating. Would he? As Hannah grappled with these conflicting emotions, her mind increasingly drifted to the past. Memories long buried began to surface, vivid and bittersweet. She remembered the first time she met Logan, both of them gangly pre-teens with skinned knees and big dreams. He'd been the new kid in town, all city swagger and hidden insecurity. Hannah had taken one look at his lost expression and decided then and there that they'd be friends. Their childhood unfolded like a sun-drenched montage, climbing trees, splashing in the creek, whispering secrets under blanket forts. Logan had been her constant, her rock, the one person who truly understood her. As they grew older, their friendship deepened into something more. Hannah recalled with startling clarity the moment everything changed. They'd been 16, sitting on the roof of Logan's house, watching a summer thunderstorm roll in. "I'm going to marry you someday, Emmy," Logan had said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. His voice had been firm, certain, as if he was stating an immutable fact. Hannah had turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "Is that so?" she'd teased, trying to hide how his words affected her. Logan had met her gaze, his eyes intense. "Yeah," he'd said softly. "It is." And then he'd kissed her, as lightning split the sky and thunder rumbled in the distance. It had been perfect, magical, the kind of moment you read about in books, but never quite believe can happen in real life. The memory faded, leaving Hannah with a dull ache in her chest. What had happened to those two kids, so sure of their love, so certain of their future together? As days turned into weeks, Hannah found herself increasingly confused by Logan's behavior. One moment he was cold and distant. The next, he'd say or do something that hinted at a deeper emotion, a lingering connection between them. It all came to a head one rainy afternoon. Hannah had just returned from visiting Elise at the hospital, her heart light with the news of her daughter's improving condition. She entered the penthouse to find Logan pacing the living room, agitation evident in every line of his body. "Where have you been?" he demanded as soon as she walked in. Hannah blinked, taken aback by his tone. "At the hospital, with Elise." "You knew that." Logan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Hannah's heart clench. "Right," he muttered. "Of course." "Logan?" Hannah said carefully. "Well, what's going on?" He turned to face her, his eyes stormy. "I can't do this anymore, Hannah. This charade. Do you really not remember any of it?" Hannah felt her frustration bubble over. "Remember what, Logan? You've been playing these mind games for weeks. What do you want from me?" "The truth," Logan exploded. "I want the truth, Hannah. Why did you leave? Why did you cut me out of your life without a word? Was what we had so meaningless to you?" Hannah stared at him, shock rendering her momentarily speechless. "What are you talking about?" she finally managed. "I didn't leave you. You left me." Logan's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you told yourself? Is that how you justified it?" "Justified what?" Hannah cried, her own anger rising to meet his. "You disappeared, Logan. One day you were there, promising me forever, and the next, nothing. No calls, no letters, you were just gone." Logan's face drained of color. "What?" he whispered. The raw pain in his voice cut through Hannah's anger. She took a step towards him, her hand reaching out instinctively before falling back to her side. "Logan," she said softly, "what happened to us?" For a long moment, Logan said nothing. Then, without a word, he strode to his office. Hannah heard the sound of a safe opening, then closing. When Logan returned, he was holding a stack of envelopes, yellowed with age. "These," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "are the letters I wrote you. Every day for months after I left for college. Letters you never responded to." Hannah's world tilted on its axis. With trembling hands, she took the stack of envelopes. Each one was addressed to her, in Logan's familiar handwriting. Each one had been marked, "Return to sender." "I don't understand," she whispered, her mind reeling. "I never got these. I never knew." Logan's eyes searched her face, desperation and hope warring in his expression. "You really didn't know," he said, wonder and dawning horror in his voice. Hannah shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Logan, I swear I had no idea. I thought you'd forgotten about me, moved on." The truth hit them both at the same moment. Someone had intercepted the letters. Someone had deliberately kept them apart. "My parents," Hannah breathed, the pieces falling into place. "It must have been my parents." The memory surfaced, sharp and painful. Her father, grim-faced and determined, telling her that Logan had called, that he'd said he needed a clean break, that the long-distance thing wasn't going to work. Hannah had been devastated, refusing to believe it. But as days turned into weeks with no word from Logan, she'd finally accepted it as truth. "Oh God," Hannah choked out, her legs giving way beneath her. She sank onto the couch, the weight of years of misunderstanding crushing down on her. Logan was at her side in an instant, his earlier anger forgotten. "Hannah," he said urgently, "talk to me. What is it?" Through her tears, Hannah told him everything. About her father's lies, about the long, painful months of waiting for a call or letter that never came, about finally accepting that Logan had moved on and forcing herself to do the same. As she spoke, Logan's face went through a gamut of emotions: shock, anger, grief, and finally, a deep, aching sadness. "All these years," he murmured, more to himself than to Hannah. "All this time, I thought." Hannah reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I'm so sorry, Logan. I should have known. I should have trusted what we had." Logan's fingers tightened around hers. "We were kids, Hannah. We trusted the adults in our lives to tell us the truth." His voice hardened. They betrayed that trust. For a long moment they sat in silence, the weight of lost years hanging heavy between them. Then Logan spoke, his voice soft and uncertain. "Do you ever wonder," he asked, "what might have been, if we'd known the truth?" Hannah's heart clenched. "All the time," she whispered. Logan's gaze met hers, and for the first time since their reunion, Hannah saw the boy she'd loved shining through the man's eyes. "I never stopped loving you, Emmy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Even when I thought you'd abandoned me, even when I tried to hate you, I never stopped." Hannah felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Oh, Luke," she breathed, using the nickname she hadn't uttered in years. "I never stopped loving you either." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and momentous. For a heartbeat, the years fell away, and they were those two kids on the rooftop again, the whole world ahead of them. But reality crashed back in all too quickly. They weren't those kids anymore. They were adults with complicated lives, with hurts and misunderstandings that couldn't be erased by a single conversation. Logan pulled away first, running a hand over his face. "This doesn't change anything," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. "We can't just pick up where we left off." Hannah nodded, her heart heavy. "I know," she said softly. "Too much has happened. We are different people now." Logan stood, pacing the room. "I built my entire life around forgetting you," he said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "I became this." He gestured to himself, to the opulent penthouse around them. "Cold, ruthless, successful. You also became the man who's saving my daughter's life," Hannah pointed out gently. "That counts for something, Logan." He turned to look at her, conflict clear in his eyes. "I don't know how to reconcile the Hannah I knew with the woman you are now," he admitted. "I don't know if I can trust—" He trailed off, but Hannah understood. The hurt ran deep on both sides. Years of perceived betrayal couldn't be undone in a single afternoon. "Where do we go from here?" Hannah asked, voicing the question they were both grappling with. Logan's shoulders sagged, the weight of the situation evident in every line of his body. "I don't know," he said honestly. I need time to process all of this." Hannah nodded, standing as well. "I understand," she said softly. "For what it's worth, Logan, I'm glad we know the truth now, even if it doesn't change anything." Logan's eyes met hers, a complex mix of emotions swirling in their depths. "It changes everything," he said quietly, "and nothing at all." With that cryptic statement, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Hannah alone with her tumultuous thoughts. As the door closed behind Logan, Hannah sank back onto the couch, her mind reeling. She picked up one of the yellowed envelopes, tracing Logan's handwriting with trembling fingers. All these years, all this pain and misunderstanding, because of a lie. Anger flared within her, at her parents for their deception, at herself for not fighting harder, at the cruel twist of fate that had kept her and Logan apart. But beneath the anger was a deeper, more poignant emotion. Grief. Grief for the years lost, for the love interrupted, for the life they might have had. As the rain pattered against the windows, Hannah allowed herself to imagine just for a moment what could have been. A life with Logan, growing together instead of apart. Would they have married young as they'd once dreamed? Would they have children of their own by now? Would Elise even exist in that alternate reality? The thought of her daughter snapped Hannah back to the present. Elise was the one constant in all of this, the one thing Hannah couldn't bring herself to regret. Whatever pain and hardship she'd endured, it had given her Elise. And now, ironically, it had brought Logan back into her life in time to save her. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. As night fell, Hannah remained on the couch, lost in thought. She barely noticed the hours slipping by, her mind replaying every interaction she'd had with Logan since their reunion, seeing them in a new light. His coldness, his bitter remarks. They weren't born of indifference, as she'd assumed, but of deep, unresolved pain. The flashes of tenderness she'd glimpsed weren't anomalies. They were the real Logan shining through the armor he'd built around himself. And what about her own feelings? Hannah had been so focused on Elise, on fulfilling her end of their bargain, that she'd pushed aside the turmoil of emotions Logan's presence stirred in her. But now, faced with the truth, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She still loved him. Despite the years, despite the changes, despite everything, a part of her heart had always belonged to Logan Hayes. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. But what did it mean for them now? They weren't the same people they'd been at 18. They had separate lives, separate worlds. Could they find their way back to each other after all this time? As dawn broke over the New York skyline, Hannah made a decision. Whatever happened between her and Logan, they needed to face it together. No more misunderstandings, no more assumptions. They owed it to themselves, and to the kids they'd once been, to at least try. With newfound determination, Hannah stood, ready to face whatever the new day might bring. She and Logan had a lot to talk about, a lot to work through. But for the first time in years, Hannah felt a glimmer of hope for a future she'd long thought lost. Little did she know, in his own room just down the hall, Logan was grappling with the same tumultuous emotions, the same tentative hope. As the first rays of sunlight crept across the city, two hearts that had been separated by lies and misunderstanding began to beat in sync once more, ready to write a new chapter in their long-interrupted story. The morning after their revelatory conversation, Hannah and Logan faced each other across the kitchen island, the air heavy with unspoken words. Logan's hands were wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, his knuckles white with tension. Hannah fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, unsure how to begin. "So," Logan said finally, breaking the silence, "I guess we have a lot to talk about." Hannah nodded, meeting his gaze. "We do." "Logan, She was interrupted by the shrill ring of her cell phone. Frowning, she glanced at the screen. It was Elise's doctor. "Dr. Patel," she answered, her heart rate quickening. "Is everything okay?" Logan watched as the color drained from Hannah's face. She gripped the counter for support, her knees threatening to give way. "We'll be right there," she said, her voice shaking. She ended the call and turned to Logan, panic etched across her features. "It's Elise. Her condition has deteriorated suddenly. They need to start an emergency treatment protocol immediately." Without hesitation, Logan sprang into action. "My helicopter can get us to the hospital in 10 minutes, he said, already reaching for his phone. "I'll have my team clear the airspace." As they rushed to the helipad on the roof, Hannah's mind was a whirlwind of fear and gratitude. Despite everything, Logan didn't hesitate for a second to help Elise. The next few hours were a blur of beeping machines, urgent medical jargon, and agonizing waits outside operating rooms. Throughout it all, Logan remained a steady presence at Hannah's side, his hand a comforting weight on her shoulder, his voice calm as he demanded updates from the medical staff. It was late into the night when Dr. Patel finally emerged from the ICU, looking exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "We've stabilized her condition," he explained. "The next 48 hours will be critical, but I'm hopeful that we've turned a corner." Hannah sagged with relief, tears streaming down her face. Without thinking, she turned and buried her face in Logan's chest. His arms came around her automatically, holding her close as she cried. "She's going to be okay," Logan murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Our girl is a fighter." The use of "our" wasn't lost on Hannah, but in that moment she was too overwhelmed to analyze it. She simply clung to Logan, drawing strength from his presence. As the days passed and Elise's condition slowly improved, Hannah watched in amazement as Logan threw himself into ensuring Elise received the best possible care. He flew in specialists from around the world, pored over medical journals late into the night, and used his considerable influence to fast-track experimental treatments. But it wasn't just his resources that impressed Hannah. It was the gentle way he spoke to Elise when she was finally well enough for visitors. The patience with which he explained complex medical terms in a way the little girl could understand. The genuine joy on his face when Elise's strength began to return. One afternoon, Hannah returned from a quick trip to the cafeteria to find Logan sitting by Elise's bedside, reading her a story. Elise was giggling weakly at Logan's exaggerated character voices, her pale face lit up with happiness. "And then," Logan was saying, his voice comically gruff, "the big bad wolf said, 'I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down,'" Elise chimed in, dissolving into giggles that turned into a small coughing fit. Logan immediately set the book aside, helping Elise sit up and rubbing her back soothingly. "Easy there, princess," he said softly. "Deep breaths, remember." Hannah felt her heart constrict at the tender scene. This was a side of Logan she'd never seen before, gentle, nurturing, almost paternal. As Elise's coughing subsided, she looked up at Logan with adoring eyes. "Will you finish the story, Uncle Logan?" she asked hopefully. Logan's gaze flickered to Hannah, standing unnoticed in the doorway. Something unreadable flashed in his eyes before he turned back to Elise with a warm smile. "Of course, princess. Where were we?" Hannah slipped away quietly, her mind whirling. When had Logan become Uncle Logan? And why did the sight of him with Elise stir such complex emotions within her? As the weeks passed, Hannah found herself reevaluating everything she thought she knew about Logan. The cold, distant man she'd first encountered in the penthouse seemed like a stranger compared to the Logan she saw now, caring, involved, and increasingly open with his emotions. One evening, as they sat in the hospital cafeteria sharing a mediocre dinner, Hannah broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "You're so good with her," she said softly. "Elise, I mean. She adores you." Logan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, his expression guarded. "She's a special kid," he said carefully. "It's hard not to care about her." Hannah took a deep breath. "Logan, I need to know, what happens after this? When Elise is better and our arrangement is over?" Logan's jaw tightened. He was quiet for so long that Hannah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. "Do you really think I could just walk away now?" he asked. "From Elise? From—" He trailed off, but his eyes locked with Hannah's, conveying what he couldn't say aloud. "From you." Hannah felt her heart rate quicken. "Logan, He held up a hand, cutting her off. "I know we have a lot to work through, Hannah. Years of hurt and misunderstanding don't just disappear overnight, but being here with you and Elise, it's made me realize some things." "What things?" Hannah whispered, hardly daring to hope. Logan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "That maybe we were given a second chance for a reason, that maybe it's not too late for us to—" He was interrupted by the shrill beep of his phone. Logan glanced at it, his expression turning serious. "It's Dr. Patel," he said. "We need to go back to Elise's room." As they hurried back, Hannah's mind raced. What had Logan been about to say? And more importantly, what did she want him to say? The next few days were a roller coaster of emotions as Elise underwent a critical phase of her treatment. Hannah and Logan barely left the hospital, snatching moments of sleep in uncomfortable chairs and surviving on vending machine snacks and terrible coffee. Through it all, they worked as a team, supporting each other and Elise. The barriers between them seemed to crumble in the face of their shared concern for the little girl who had, against all odds, brought them back together. It was during one of these long nights that Logan finally opened up about the years they'd spent apart. As Elise slept peacefully, monitored by a team of nurses, Logan and Hannah sat side by side in the dimly lit hospital room. I was so angry for so long, Logan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought you'd given up on us, on everything we'd planned. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove that I didn't need anyone, that I was better off alone. Hannah listened silently, her heart aching for the pain they'd both endured. But the truth is, Logan continued, I was miserable. Every success felt hollow because I couldn't share it with you. Every milestone just reminded me of the future we'd lost. He turned to look at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. When I saw you at that gala, it was like the world stopped spinning. You were even more beautiful than I remembered. And for a moment I thought maybe there was still a chance for us. Hannah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Oh, Logan, she breathed, I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought you'd moved on, even when I tried to build a life without you, you were always there, in my heart. Logan reached out, cupping her face gently. I was such an idiot, he said, his thumb brushing away her tears. I should have known you'd never abandon me. I should have fought harder to find out the truth. Hannah leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. We were both young, she said softly, and we both trusted the wrong people, but Logan, we're here now, together. As if drawn by an invisible force, they leaned towards each other. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, years of longing and regret pouring into that single point of contact. When they pulled apart, both were breathing heavily, overwhelmed by the intensity of emotion. What does this mean? Hannah asked, her voice trembling. Logan's gaze was steady, filled with a warmth she hadn't seen in years. It means we have a lot to figure out, he said. But I'm willing to try if you are. Before Hannah could respond, a small voice interrupted them. Mommy, Uncle Logan? They turned to see Elise watching them with sleepy confusion. Hannah quickly moved to her daughter's side, smoothing back her hair. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly. How are you feeling? As Logan joined them, his hand resting comfortingly on Elise's blanket-covered foot, Hannah was struck by how right this felt. The three of them, together, like a family. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. There was still so much uncertainty, so many obstacles to overcome. But looking at Logan's gentle interaction with Elise, at the love shining in his eyes as he glanced between mother and daughter, Hannah felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful from the ashes of their past. The following weeks brought gradual but steady improvement in Elise's condition. As her strength returned, so did her vibrant personality, filling the hospital room with laughter and chatter. Logan became a constant presence, juggling his work responsibilities with long hours at the hospital. Hannah watched in awe as he effortlessly transitioned from high-powered CEO to doting uncle, helping Elise with her physical therapy exercises one moment and closing multi-million-dollar deals via video call the next. One sunny afternoon, as Elise napped peacefully, Hannah and Logan took a rare moment for themselves, walking hand in hand through the hospital's rooftop garden. So I've been thinking, Logan said, his tone serious, about us, about the future. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. Oh, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Logan stopped, turning to face her. He took both her hands in his gaze intense. I know we can't just pick up where we left off, he said. Too much has happened, we're different people now. But Hannah, I don't want to lose you again. Either of you. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. What are you saying, Logan? He took a deep breath. I'm saying I want us to try, really try, to build something new, something even better than what we had before. I want to be there for you and for Elise, if you'll have me. Hannah's mind whirled. This was everything she'd dreamed of but never dared hope for. Yet a small part of her hesitated, fear holding her back. Logan, she said softly, are you sure? This isn't just gratitude or nostalgia, because Elise and we're a package deal, and our life, it's not glamorous or... Logan cut her off with a gentle kiss. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining with determination. Hannah Stone, he said firmly, I am in love with you. With the girl you were, the woman you've become, and every version of you in between. And Elise, that little girl has stolen my heart completely. I want it all. The good days, the bad days, the sleepless nights, and the quiet moments. I want a life with you. Both of you. Tears streamed down Hannah's face as she threw her arms around Logan's neck. Yes, she whispered fiercely. Yes, to all of it. As they held each other, bathed in the warm afternoon sunlight, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They had years of separation to overcome, trust to rebuild, and a life together to figure out. But for the first time in years, Hannah felt truly, completely hopeful about the future. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the buzz of Logan's phone. He glanced at it, his eyes widening. "It's Dr. Patel," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Elise's latest test results are in." Hand in hand, they rushed back to Elise's room, their hearts pounding in unison. Whatever news awaited them, they would face it together, as a family. As they approached Elise's room, they could hear her giggling, a sound that just weeks ago had seemed like an impossible dream. They entered to find Dr. Patel smiling broadly, Elise bouncing excitedly on her bed. "Mommy, Uncle Logan," Elise called out, her face glowing with happiness. "Dr. Patel says, I can go home soon." Hannah felt her knees go weak with relief. Logan's arm came around her waist, supporting her as Dr. Patel approached them. "The latest results are extremely promising," he explained, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Elise has responded remarkably well to the treatment. While we'll need to continue with follow-up care and monitoring, I see no reason why she can't continue her recovery at home." Hannah burst into tears of joy, turning to bury her face in Logan's chest. He held her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright, as he looked over her head at Elise. "You hear that, Princess?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You get to go home." As Hannah composed herself and moved to embrace her daughter, Logan found himself struck by a sudden realization. Home. The word held a new meaning now. It wasn't a place, not his lonely penthouse or Hannah's modest apartment. Home was here, with these two incredible, strong, loving people who had completely transformed his life. In that moment, watching Hannah and Elise laugh and cry together, Logan made a silent vow. He would spend the rest of his life ensuring that they always felt safe, loved, and cherished. They were his home now, and he would move heaven and earth to protect and nurture the precious gift he'd been given. A second chance at love, at family, at true happiness. As Elise chatted excitedly about all the things she wanted to do once she was out of the hospital, Logan caught Hannah's eye over their daughter's head. The love and gratitude he saw reflected there matched his own, and he felt his heart swell with an emotion so powerful it almost overwhelmed him. They had a long road ahead, filled with challenges and adjustments, but Logan knew with a certainty that ran bone deep that as long as they faced it together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The future stretched out before them, bright with promise and possibility. And for the first time in years, Logan Hayes found himself looking forward to every single moment of it. The day of Elise's discharge from the hospital dawned bright and clear, a perfect reflection of the hope and excitement that filled the air. The bustling pediatric ward was a flurry of activity as nurses and doctors made their final rounds, checking vitals and offering last-minute advice. In the middle of it all stood Elise, her golden curls bouncing as she practically vibrated with anticipation. Gone was the pale, fragile girl who had entered the hospital months ago. In her place stood a vibrant, energetic child, her cheeks flushed with health and her eyes sparkling with life. "Mommy, Uncle Logan, look!" Elise exclaimed, twirling in her new dress, a gift from Logan to celebrate her homecoming. "I'm a princess." Hannah laughed, her eyes misty with joy and relief. "You certainly are, sweetheart," she said, kneeling to adjust the sparkly tiara perched atop Elise's curls. "The most beautiful princess in all the land." Logan watched the scene from the doorway, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. The past few months had been a roller coaster of emotions, fear, hope, love, and everything in between. But seeing Elise now, healthy and happy, made every sleepless night and anxious moment worth it. As Hannah stood, her eyes met Logan's, and the love that passed between them was almost palpable. They had grown closer during Elise's treatment, rediscovering the connection that had been severed years ago. But there was still so much left unsaid, so many decisions to be made about their future. Dr. Patel entered the room, his clipboard in hand and a warm smile on his face. "Well, Miss Elise," he said, his voice filled with genuine affection. "Are you ready to say goodbye to all of us?" Elise nodded enthusiastically, then paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "But I'll miss you, Dr. Patel," she said, "and Nurse Jenny, and Mr. Whiskers." She glanced at the stuffed cat that had been her constant companion throughout her treatment. Dr. Patel knelt down to Elise's level. "We'll miss you too, Elise. But remember, this isn't goodbye forever. We'll still see you for your checkups. And Mr. Whiskers?" He winked conspiratorially. "I think he might just want to go home with you." Elise's face lit up, and she hugged the stuffed cat tightly to her chest. "Really? Oh, thank you, Doctor." Patil. As the doctor went through the final discharge procedures with Hannah, Logan found himself lost in thought. Watching Hannah and Elise together, seeing the bond between mother and daughter, he felt a pang of something. Longing? Uncertainty? He couldn't quite put his finger on it. The truth was, Logan had been grappling with a growing sense of unease as Elise's discharge date approached. Throughout her treatment, he had a clear purpose: to use his resources and influence to ensure she received the best possible care. But now that Elise was better, where did he fit into their lives? He loved them both, more than he ever thought possible. But a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts. What if Hannah had only grown close to him out of gratitude? What if, once the crisis was over, she realized she didn't need him in her life after all? Logan was pulled from his brooding by Elise's excited voice. "Uncle Logan, will you carry me to the car? Please." He plastered on a smile, pushing his doubts aside for the moment. "Of course, Princess," he said, scooping her up into his arms. "Your chariot awaits." As they made their way through the hospital corridors, Elise waved goodbye to the staff who had become like family over the past months. Nurses and orderlies called out well wishes, and even some of the other young patients peeked out of their rooms to see the girl who had become something of a celebrity on the ward. Outside, Logan's driver was waiting with a sleek black SUV. As Logan carefully settled Elise into her car seat, making sure she was comfortable for the ride home, Hannah hung back to have a final word with Dr. Patel. "I can't thank you enough," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything you've done for Elise and for us." Dr. Patel smiled warmly. "It's been my privilege, Miss Stone. Elise is a remarkable child, and if I may say," he added, glancing towards Logan, who was fussing over Elise's seatbelt, "you have a remarkable support system. Don't take that for granted." Hannah followed his gaze, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I won't," she promised softly. The ride back to Logan's penthouse, which had become their de facto home during Elise's treatment, was filled with Elise's excited chatter. She pointed out landmarks she recognized, marveled at how tall the buildings were, and peppered Logan with questions about everything she saw. Logan answered each query patiently, his deep voice a soothing counterpoint to Elise's high-pitched excitement. Hannah watched them interact, marveling at how naturally Logan had slipped into a paternal role. It was as if he'd always been a part of their little family. As they pulled up to the building, Elise's eyes widened. "Wow," she breathed. "Is this where we're going to live now, Mommy?" Hannah hesitated, glancing at Logan. They hadn't discussed living arrangements beyond Elise's immediate recovery period. "For now, sweetheart," she said carefully. "While you're getting better." Logan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at her words, but he said nothing as he helped Elise out of the car. The penthouse had been transformed in preparation for Elise's arrival. Colorful balloons and welcome home banners adorned the usually austere living room. A mountain of presents, from Logan, his staff, and well-wishers from the hospital, was piled in one corner. Elise's eyes were as wide as saucers as she took it all in. "Is this all for me?" she asked in wonder. Logan knelt beside her, his face softening into a genuine smile. "All for you, Princess. Why don't you go see what's in those packages?" As Elise dove into the gifts with unbridled enthusiasm, Hannah pulled Logan aside. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. Logan shrugged, a hint of his old defensiveness creeping into his posture. "I wanted to," he said simply. "She deserves it after everything she's been through." Hannah studied his face, sensing the undercurrent of tension in his voice. "Logan, what's wrong?" she asked. "You've been off ever since we left the hospital." Logan opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Elise's delighted squeal. "Mommy, Uncle Logan, look, it's a real princess dress." The moment passed and Logan's mask of calm slipped back into place. "Why don't you try it on, Princess?" he suggested, his voice warm despite the conflict Hannah could see brewing behind his eyes. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Elise, despite her excitement, tired easily, a reminder that her recovery was still ongoing. By early evening, she was sound asleep in her new bedroom, surrounded by her gifts and with Mr. Whiskers clutched tightly to her chest. Hannah stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. She felt Logan's presence behind her before he spoke. "She looks happy," he said softly. Hannah turned to face him, reaching out to take his hand. "She is happy," she replied. "We both are. Logan, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done." Logan's expression tightened, and he gently withdrew his hand. "You don't have to thank me, Hannah. I'd do anything for Elise. For both of you." There was something in his tone that set alarm bells ringing in Hannah's mind. "Logan," she said carefully, "what's going on? Talk to me." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Hannah's heart ache. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about the future, about us." Hannah felt her stomach drop. "What about us?" she asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Logan's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of love and resignation that Hannah couldn't quite understand. "Elise is better now," he said. "She's going to be okay. You don't need me anymore." Hannah stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "Logan, of course we need you. We love you." Logan shook his head, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "Do you, Hannah? Or are you just grateful for what I've done? Because if that's all this is—" "How can you say that?" Hannah interrupted, her voice rising. She glanced quickly at Elise's room, lowering her tone. "After everything we've been through, everything we've shared, how can you doubt what I feel for you?" Logan's composure cracked, the pain and insecurity he'd been hiding finally breaking through. "Because I'm terrified, Hannah," he exclaimed. "Terrified that once the crisis is over, once you don't need my money or my influence anymore, you'll realize that I'm not enough." Hannah felt as if she'd been slapped. "Not enough?" she repeated incredulously. "Logan, you're everything. Everything I've ever wanted. Everything Elise and I need. How can you not see that?" Logan turned away, his shoulders hunched. I think it's best if I go away for a while," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Give you and Elise some time to adjust, to figure out what you really want." Panic surged through Hannah. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when they were so close to having everything they'd ever dreamed of. "No," she said firmly, moving to stand in front of him. "No. You don't get to do this, Logan Hayes. You don't get to decide what's best for us without even talking to me." Logan's eyes met hers, filled with a storm of emotions. "Hannah, please," he began, but she cut him off. "No, you listen to me," she said, her voice shaking with intensity. "I love you. Not your money, not your influence, not what you can do for us. You, the boy who held my hand on the water tower, the man who moved heaven and earth to save my daughter, the person who makes me feel whole for the first time in years." Tears were streaming down Hannah's face now, but she pressed on. "I know we have issues to work through. I know we can't just pretend the past didn't happen. But Logan, don't you see? This is our chance. Our chance to build the life we always dreamed of. Please, please don't throw that away because you're scared." Logan stood frozen, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "Hannah," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, I don't know how to do this. How to be part of a family. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not the man you and Elise deserve?" Hannah stepped closer, cupping his face in her hands. "Oh, Luke," she said softly, using the nickname from their youth. "Don't you understand? You already are that man. You've shown it every day since we came back into your life. You love Elise like she's your own. You've been my rock through the hardest time of my life. That's the man we deserve. That's the man we love." For a long moment, Logan said nothing. Then, with a choked sob, he pulled Hannah into his arms, holding her as if he never wanted to let go. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you again. Either of you." Hannah pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Then don't push us away," she said simply. "Stay, fight for us. Love us, Luke. That's all we need." Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. Years of longing and love poured into a single moment. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Okay," Logan said softly, resting his forehead against Hannah's. "Okay, I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together." Hannah smiled, her heart soaring. "Together," she agreed. Their moment of peace was shattered by the shrill ring of Logan's phone. He glanced at it, frowning. "It's my lawyer," he said, confusion evident in his voice. "I should take this." Hannah nodded, stepping back. She watched as Logan answered the call, his expression growing more serious with each passing second. "What?" he said sharply. "When?" "No, I understand. Thank you for letting me know." He ended the call, his face pale. "Logan?" Hannah asked, worry creeping into her voice. "What is it?" Logan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Hannah's with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "It's your ex," he said. "Elise's father. He's filing for custody." Hannah felt the ground drop out from beneath her. "What?" she gasped. But he's never even met her. He left before she was born." Logan's jaw tightened, a fierce protectiveness flashing in his eyes. "Apparently, he's heard about Elise's condition, and about my involvement. He's claiming that you're an unfit mother, that you've sold yourself to me in exchange for medical treatment." Hannah staggered, her legs giving way beneath her. Logan caught her, guiding her gently to the couch. "This can't be happening," Hannah whispered, her mind reeling. He can't take her. Logan, he can't take my baby." Logan knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. His voice was steady, filled with a determination that cut through Hannah's panic. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "He's not going to take Elise. I won't let that happen. We won't let that happen. You hear me? We're going to fight this, Hannah. Together." Hannah looked into Logan's eyes, seeing the strength and love reflected there. Slowly she nodded, her own resolve hardening. "Together," she repeated, her voice growing stronger. Just then, a small voice interrupted them. "Mommy, Uncle Logan, why are you crying?" They turned to see Elise standing in the hallway, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with concern. Logan and Hannah exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. Then, as one, they opened their arms to Elise. As the little girl climbed onto the couch between them, snuggling into their embrace, Hannah and Logan held each other's gaze over her head. In that moment, they both knew this was what they were fighting for. Their family, their future, and nothing, not past hurts, not insecurities, not vindictive ex-partners, was going to tear them apart. The battle ahead would be tough, but they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, united by a love that had withstood time, distance, and misunderstanding. A love that, now tested once again, would prove stronger than ever. As they held Elise between them, soothing her concerns and reassuring her of their love, Hannah and Logan silently renewed their commitment to each other and to the family they were building. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them head-on, their bond unbreakable, their love unshakable. The road ahead might be uncertain, but of one thing they were sure: they were stronger together than they ever were apart. And for Elise, for their future, they would fight with everything they had. The next morning dawned with a sense of urgency that permeated the penthouse. Logan was up before sunrise, pacing the living room with his phone glued to his ear, speaking in hushed but intense tones with his legal team. Hannah, after a restless night, busied herself in the kitchen, preparing Elise's favorite breakfast in an attempt to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Elise, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her, chattered happily about her plans for the day as she devoured her pancakes. "Can we go to the park today, Mummy? Uncle Logan promised to teach me how to fly a kite." Hannah forced a smile, her heart clenching at her daughter's innocence. "We'll see, sweetheart. Uncle Logan might be a bit busy today, but we'll definitely do it soon, okay?" As if on cue, Logan entered the kitchen, his face etched with concern but softening immediately at the sight of Elise. "Good morning, Princess," he said, dropping a kiss on top of her curls. "Those pancakes look delicious." Elise beamed up at him. "Mommy made them. She said you might be too busy to fly kites today, but we'll do it soon, right?" Logan's eyes met Hannah's over Elise's head, a silent communication passing between them. "Absolutely," he said, his voice warm despite the tension in his shoulders. "I promise we'll go fly kites very soon. But today, how would you like to have a special day with Aunt Sarah?" Sarah was Logan's personal assistant, a kind-hearted woman who had taken an instant liking to Elise during her hospital stay. Elise's eyes lit up. "Really? Can we go to the zoo? Aunt Sarah said they have baby penguins." Logan chuckled, the sound slightly strained to Hannah's ears, but genuine nonetheless. "I think that can be arranged. Why don't you go get ready while I talk to Mommy for a minute?" As Elise skipped off to her room, Logan turned to Hannah, his expression serious. "My lawyers are working on our strategy," he said in a low voice. "They want to meet with us this afternoon to go over our options." Hannah nodded, her stomach churning with anxiety. "What do you think our chances are?" she asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Logan's jaw tightened. "Honestly, it's complicated. Your ex has no legal standing. He's never been a part of Elise's life, but—" He hesitated, clearly struggling with how to phrase his next words. "But what?" Hannah pressed. Logan sighed. "But he's playing dirty. He's trying to paint you as an unfit mother, claiming that you prostituted yourself for Elise's medical care." The last words came out in a rush, as if Logan couldn't bear to say them slowly. Hannah felt as if she'd been slapped. "That's ridiculous," she exclaimed. "How could anyone believe that?" "They won't," Logan said firmly, taking her hands in his. "We won't let them. Hannah, listen to me. We're going to fight this with everything we've got. I've got the best lawyers in the country working on our case. And more importantly, we have the truth on our side." Hannah nodded, trying to draw strength from Logan's confidence. What about us?" she asked hesitantly. "Won't our relationship complicate things?" Logan's expression softened. "It might," he admitted. "But Hannah, I'm not going to hide how I feel about you, about both of you. You're my family now, and I'm going to stand by you every step of the way." Tears welled up in Hannah's eyes. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. Logan pulled her into a tight embrace. "You'll never have to find out," he murmured into her hair. "We're in this together, remember?" Their moment was interrupted by Elise bounding back into the kitchen, dressed in her favorite outfit and clutching Mr. Whiskers. "I'm ready," she announced. As they prepared Elise for her day out with Sarah, Hannah couldn't help but marvel at Logan's ability to compartmentalize. He was all smiles and jokes with Elise, his earlier tension hidden behind a mask of cheerful normalcy. Once Elise was safely off with Sarah, the atmosphere in the penthouse changed palpably. Logan's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of their situation evident in every line of his body. "Okay," he said, running a hand through his hair. "The lawyers will be here in an hour. Let's go over everything again, make sure we haven't missed anything." As they sat at the dining room table, surrounded by legal documents and childhood photos of Elise, Hannah felt a surge of determination. This man who had abandoned her daughter before she was even born had no right to swoop in now and try to take her away. Not when they had finally found happiness, finally become the family Elise deserved. "We're going to win this," she said firmly, as much to convince herself as Logan. "We have to." Logan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We will," he said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "I promise you, Hannah. I will move heaven and earth to keep our family together. Our family." The words sent a warmth spreading through Hannah's chest. Yes, she thought, that's what they were now, a family, and they would fight with everything they had to protect it. As the hours ticked by and they delved deeper into legal strategies and counter-arguments, Hannah found herself drawing strength from Logan's unwavering support. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. And somehow, someway, they would come out stronger on the other side. The future might be uncertain, but of one thing Hannah was sure: with Logan by her side and Elise in their hearts, they could overcome anything. The battle for their family had just begun, but Hannah was ready. Ready to fight, ready to love, ready to build the life they all deserved. As the lawyers arrived and the meeting began, Hannah squeezed Logan's hand tightly. He returned the pressure, a silent promise passing between them. Together they would weather this storm. Together they would protect their daughter. Together they would build their happily ever after, one day at a time. The weeks following the custody battle were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional upheavals, and cautious hope. Hannah, Logan, and Elise found themselves navigating a new reality, one where their bond as a family was tested and ultimately strengthened by the challenges they faced. The courtroom became a second home, as Hannah and Logan fought tirelessly to keep Elise. Logan's team of high-powered lawyers worked around the clock, building a case that showcased Hannah's devotion as a mother and exposed the hollowness of her ex's claims. Throughout it all, Logan remained a steadfast pillar of support, his hand never leaving Hannah's as they sat through grueling testimonies and cross-examinations. Elise, shielded as much as possible from the legal storm, continued to thrive under the love and care of her mother and the man she had come to see as a father. Her recovery progressed steadily, each day bringing new strength and vitality to her small frame. The bond between Elise and Logan deepened, their relationship evolving from Uncle Logan to something far more profound and unbreakable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of uncertainty, the judge delivered her verdict. Hannah would retain full custody of Elise, with her ex granted limited supervised visitation rights. The relief that washed over Hannah and Logan was palpable, their embrace in the courtroom speaking volumes about the journey they had endured together. As they left the courthouse for the last time, Elise perched on Logan's shoulders and Hannah's hand firmly in his. They truly felt like a family united. The challenges they had faced had only served to strengthen their bond, cementing their commitment to each other and to the life they were building together. The transition to their new family dynamic wasn't without its hurdles. Logan, accustomed to the solitary life of a high-powered CEO, found himself adjusting to the beautiful chaos of family life. There were moments of frustration as he learned to balance board meetings with bedtime stories, conference calls with cooking dinner. But for every moment of stress, there were a dozen moments of joy. Elise's laughter echoing through the penthouse, quiet evenings cuddled on the couch with Hannah, lazy Sunday mornings spent making pancakes together. Hannah, too, had her own adjustments to make. The world of wealth and privilege that Logan inhabited was foreign to her, and at times, overwhelming. She found herself grappling with insecurities, wondering if she truly belonged in this glittering world of galas and charity events. One evening, as they prepared for a high-profile charity dinner, Hannah's anxieties bubbled to the surface. "Logan," she said hesitantly, fidgeting with the clasp of an expensive necklace he had gifted her, "are you sure about this? About us? I mean, look at me. I'm just a waitress from Queens. I don't know how to navigate your world." Logan paused in the act of adjusting his tie, turning to face her with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Hannah," he said softly, crossing the room to take her hands in his. "What are you talking about? You're not just anything. You're the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known. You're the mother of our daughter. You're the love of my life." Tears welled up in Hannah's eyes. "But your colleagues, your business partners, what do they think about you being with someone like me?" Logan's expression softened, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Oh, Emmy," he said, using the old nickname that never failed to make her heart skip a beat. "Don't you see? You're not the one who needs to fit into my world. We're creating our own world together, and anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve to be a part of it." He pulled her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Besides," he added with a chuckle, "do you really think I care what a bunch of stuffy businessmen think? The only opinions that matter to me are yours and Elise's." Hannah laughed despite herself, feeling the knot of anxiety in her chest loosen. "When did you get so wise?" she teased, leaning into his embrace. Logan's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Must be all those bedtime stories I've been reading. Those princesses have some pretty good life advice." As they made their way to the charity gala, Hannah felt a new sense of confidence. She might not have been born into this world of wealth and privilege, but she had earned her place in it, through love, strength, and resilience. And with Logan and Elise by her side, she could face anything. The months that followed brought a settling, a sense of rightness as their little family found its rhythm. Logan surprised both Hannah and himself with how naturally he took to fatherhood. He was there for every milestone: Elise's first day back at school, her triumphant return to the playground, the day she finally mastered riding a bike without training wheels. Each moment was cherished, captured not just in photographs, but in the hearts of all three of them. Hannah watched with pride and love as Logan and Elise's relationship blossomed. The man who had once seemed so cold and distant now spent hours on the floor of Elise's room, voices pitched high as they acted out elaborate stories with her dolls. He attended every school play, science fair, and parent-teacher conference, his face beaming with pride at each of Elise's accomplishments. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as Hannah watched Logan and Elise bent over a complex Lego structure in the living room, she felt a wave of contentment wash over her. This was what she had always dreamed of: a loving partner, a happy child, a home filled with laughter and warmth. The path to get here had been far from straightforward, but every twist and turn had led them to this perfect moment. "Mommy!" Elise called out, breaking Hannah from her reverie. "Come help us build the castle." Hannah laughed, joining her family on the floor. As she reached for a Lego brick, her hand brushed Logan's. Their eyes met over Elise's head, a world of love and understanding passing between them in that single glance. Later that night, After Elise had been tucked into bed with promises of more Lego adventures in the morning, Hannah and Logan stood on the balcony of the penthouse, the glittering New York skyline spread out before them. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Hannah asked, leaning back against Logan's chest as his arms encircled her waist. "If someone had told me a year ago that this would be my life, I never would have believed them." Logan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I know what you mean," he said softly. "For so long I thought I had everything I could ever want. Success, money, power. But it wasn't until you and Elise came back into my life that I realized how empty it all was without love." Hannah turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I'm so glad we found our way back to each other," she whispered. "Even with all the challenges, all the pain we've been through, I wouldn't change a thing if it meant not ending up right here, right now." Logan's eyes shone with emotion as he leaned down to kiss her, pouring all of his love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out as if he couldn't hold them back any longer. Hannah's eyes widened in surprise. "What?" Logan took a step back, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "But I'm realizing now that every moment with you is perfect." He sank down on one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Hannah Stone," he said, his voice filled with love and certainty, "will you marry me? Will you make me the happiest man alive and let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Elise?" Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Logan slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands before standing and pulling her into a passionate kiss. As they broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, a small voice interrupted their moment. "Does this mean I get to be a flower girl?" They turned to see Elise standing in the doorway, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest and a hopeful expression on her face. Hannah and Logan exchanged a glance before bursting into laughter. "Come here, you little eavesdropper," Logan said, scooping Elise up into his arms. "Yes, you get to be the flower girl, the most beautiful flower girl in the whole world." As the three of them stood there, wrapped in a family hug under the starry sky, Hannah felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. This was it. This was her happily ever after. Not a fairy tale ending, but something far better. A real, messy, beautiful life, filled with love and laughter. The journey to this moment had been long and often painful, but standing here with the two people she loved most in the world, Hannah knew that every step had been worth it. They had overcome separation, misunderstanding, illness, and legal battles. They had faced their fears, confronted their pasts, and emerged stronger for it. Logan, once so guarded and alone, had opened his heart to love and family. Hannah, who had struggled for so long as a single mother, had found not just a partner but a true soulmate, and Elise, their miracle child, had blossomed in the warmth of their love, her future now bright with promise. As they made their way back inside, Elise chattering excitedly about wedding plans and Logan and Hannah exchanging amused glances over her head, Hannah felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had thrown them countless curveballs, but it had also given them the greatest gift of all, each other. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its own challenges. There would be disagreements to navigate, compromises to make, and new obstacles to overcome. But Hannah knew that together they could face anything. They were no longer three separate individuals, but a family, unbreakable, unstoppable, and filled with love. As Hannah drifted off to sleep that night, Logan's arm draped protectively over her, and Elise snuggled between them. Having insisted on a family sleepover to celebrate, she sent a silent thank you to the universe for second chances, for unexpected blessings, and for the beautiful, imperfect, wonderful life that lay ahead. The coming days were a whirlwind of excitement as news of their engagement spread. Elise took her role as flower girl-to-be very seriously, spending hours poring over bridal magazines with Hannah and offering her decidedly unique 6-year-old perspective on wedding planning. Logan, for his part, threw himself into the preparations with the same intensity he applied to his business dealings. He was determined to give Hannah the wedding of her dreams, no expense spared. However, he quickly learned that his bride-to-be had other ideas. "Logan," Hannah said one evening as they sat surrounded by sample invitations and seating charts, "I appreciate all of this, I really do, but we don't need a huge, fancy wedding. That's not us. Logan looked up, surprise evident on his face. But don't you want the fairy tale? The big white dress, the cathedral, the horse-drawn carriage? Hannah laughed, reaching out to take his hand. Oh, Luke, she said softly, using the nickname that never failed to make his heart skip a beat. Don't you see? We've already had our fairy tale. It's messy and complicated and nothing like the stories, but it's ours. And it's perfect. Understanding dawned in Logan's eyes. So what do you want? He asked, squeezing her hand gently. Hannah's smile was radiant. I want to marry you, she said simply. I want Elise there, and maybe a few close friends. I want it to be about us, our love, our family, not about impressing anyone or living up to some society expectation. Logan felt a wave of love wash over him. This was why he adored Hannah, her ability to see through the trappings of wealth to what really mattered. Okay, he said, pulling her close. Let's do it your way, small, intimate, just about us. And so, on a crisp autumn day 3 months later, Hannah and Logan stood hand in hand on the rooftop of their penthouse, the New York skyline serving as a backdrop to their vows. Elise, resplendent in a flower crown and twirly dress, beamed as she scattered rose petals at their feet. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. Logan and Hannah had written their own vows, each word a testament to the journey that had brought them to this moment. Hannah, Logan began, his voice thick with emotion. For years I thought I had lost my chance at true happiness. I built walls around my heart, convinced that success and wealth were all I needed. But then you and Elise came crashing back into my life, and suddenly those walls didn't stand a chance. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. You've taught me what real strength looks like. You've shown me the power of unconditional love. With you and Elise, I found a home I never knew I was missing. I promised to spend every day of our lives together, cherishing you, supporting you, and loving you with everything I am. Tears streamed down Hannah's face as she began her own vows. Logan, my Luke, she said softly, our path to this moment has been anything but straightforward. We've faced separation, misunderstanding, and more challenges than I can count. But through it all, our love has only grown stronger. She squeezed his hands, her eyes never leaving his. You came back into my life when I needed you most, and you've been my rock ever since. You love Elise as if she were your own, and you've given us a family I never dreamed we could have. I promise to stand by you through whatever life throws our way, to love you fiercely and completely, and to never take for granted the miraculous second chance we've been given. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Elise let out a cheer, prompting laughter from the small gathering of friends and family. The love that surrounded them was palpable, a testament to the bonds they had forged and the lives they had touched. The reception that followed was a joyous affair, filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Logan and Hannah moved among their guests hand in hand, their happiness infectious. Elise flitted about in a sugar-fueled excitement, declaring to anyone who would listen that this was the best day ever. As the evening wore on, Logan found Hannah standing at the edge of the rooftop, gazing out at the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Hayes," he murmured, the new name sending a thrill through both of them. Hannah leaned back into his embrace, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she said softly. "A year ago I was a struggling single mum, desperate to save my daughter. And now?" "And now?" Logan prompted gently. Hannah turned in his arms, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "And now I have everything I ever dreamed of and more. A husband who loves me, a daughter who's healthy and happy, a family that's whole." Logan felt his heart swell with emotion. "You've given me the same gift, you know," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You and Elise, you've made my life complete in a way I never thought possible." They stood there for a long moment, basking in the love they shared, until a familiar voice broke the silence. "Mommy, Daddy, come dance with me." Logan and Hannah turned to see Elise bouncing towards them, her flower crown askew and her face glowing with happiness. Without hesitation, they each took one of her hands, allowing their daughter to lead them back to the dance floor. As the three of them twirled and laughed together, surrounded by the love of family and friends, Hannah felt a sense of absolute rightness settle over her. This was what happily ever after looked like, not a perfect problem-free existence, but a life filled with love, laughter, and the unshakable knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Logan caught her eye over Elise's head, his gaze filled with a love so deep it took her breath away. In that moment, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that this beautiful, messy, wonderful life they had built together was exactly where she was meant to be. As the night drew to a close and their guests began to depart, Logan, Hannah, and Elise stood together at the edge of the rooftop. The city spread out before them like a glittering promise of all that was yet to come. "What happens now?" Elise asked, her voice sleepy but content. Logan and Hannah exchanged a smile over their daughter's head. "Now," Logan said, scooping Elise up into his arms, "we live happily ever after." And as they made their way back inside, a family united by love and strengthened by adversity, they knew that their happily ever after was just beginning. The journey that had brought them to this point had been filled with challenges, heartache, and unexpected twists, but it had also been a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. In the weeks and months that followed, Logan, Hannah, and Elise settled into their new life as an official family. The transition wasn't always smooth. There were arguments about bedtimes and homework, disagreements about household responsibilities, and the occasional clash of parenting styles. But underlying it all was a deep, abiding love and a commitment to making their family work. Logan threw himself into fatherhood with the same passion and dedication he applied to his business endeavors. He was there for every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every skinned knee and triumph. Watching him with Elise, Hannah often found herself overwhelmed with love and gratitude. The man who had once seemed so cold and distant was now the most devoted father she could have imagined for her daughter. Hannah, for her part, blossomed in her new role. With Logan's encouragement, she went back to school, pursuing the degree in social work she had always dreamed of. She found a balance between her studies, her family life, and her growing involvement in various children's charities, causes that were now close to her heart after Elise's medical journey. Elise thrived under the love and stability of her new family unit. Her health continued to improve, and she grew into a vibrant, curious child with her mother's compassion and her adoptive father's quick wit. The bond between Elise and Logan deepened with each passing day, their relationship a beautiful testament to the fact that love, not blood, makes a family. As their first anniversary approached, Logan surprised Hannah with news that left her speechless. He had been working in secret with his legal team, and the paperwork was finally ready. He wanted to legally adopt Elise. "Are you sure?" Hannah asked, tears streaming down her face as she held the adoption papers in trembling hands. "Logan, it's a big step." Logan's eyes were filled with certainty and love as he took her hands in his. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said softly. "Elise is my daughter in every way that matters. I want to make it official." The day Logan officially became Elise's father was a celebration of love and family. As they stood before the judge, Elise beaming between them, Hannah felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. This was everything she had ever wanted for her daughter, a father who would love her unconditionally, who had chosen her just as much as she had chosen him. Life, of course, wasn't always perfect. There were still challenges to face, obstacles to overcome. Logan's high-profile position occasionally brought unwanted media attention to their family. Hannah sometimes struggled with insecurities about her place in Logan's world of wealth and privilege, and as Elise grew older, they had to navigate the complexities of explaining her unique family situation to her and others. But through it all, their love for each other and for Elise remained constant. They faced each challenge as a united front, their bond only growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. 5 years after their wedding, as they celebrated Elise's 11th birthday, Hannah found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. The backyard of their new family home, a compromise between Logan's love of luxury and Hannah's desire for a more grounded lifestyle, was filled with the laughter of Elise and her friends. Logan was at the grill, playfully arguing with Elise about the proper way to flip a burger. As Hannah watched her family, she felt a familiar wave of gratitude wash over her. Their story hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had been filled with pain, misunderstandings, and seemingly insurmountable obstacles, but it had also been a story of resilience, of second chances, and of a love strong enough to overcome any challenge. Logan caught her eye across the yard, his smile softening as he took in her thoughtful expression. He made his way over to her, wrapping an arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Hayes," he murmured, echoing the words he had spoken on their wedding night. Hannah leaned into him, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "I was just thinking about how lucky we are," she said softly. "About how far we've come, and how excited I am for whatever comes next." Logan's arm tightened around her. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he said, his voice filled with love and certainty. As Elise ran up to them, demanding that they join in the party games, Hannah and Logan exchanged a look of pure happiness. This was their happily ever after. Not a perfect fairy tale ending, but a real messy, beautiful life filled with love, laughter, and the unshakable knowledge that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Their story was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more obstacles to overcome. But with the love they shared, a love that had withstood time, distance, and seemingly insurmountable odds, they were ready for whatever the future might hold. Together as a family, they would write the next chapters of their extraordinary love story, one day at a time. 10 years had passed since that fateful day when Hannah Stone walked into a charity gala, desperate and determined to save her daughter's life. Now, on a warm summer evening, the New York skyline glittered beyond the windows of the Hayes family penthouse, a silent witness to how far they had come. Hannah stood in the doorway of Elise's room, watching as her now 16-year-old daughter fretted over her appearance in the mirror. The years had been kind to Elise. The sickly child had blossomed into a vibrant teenager, her golden curls cascading down her back and her blue eyes, so like Logan's, sparkling with excitement. "Mum," Elise groaned, catching sight of Hannah in the reflection, "are you sure this dress is okay for the gala? I don't want to embarrass Dad." Hannah smiled, crossing the room to stand behind her daughter. "Sweetheart, you could wear a potato sack and your father would still think you're the most beautiful girl in the room." As if summoned by their conversation, Logan appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a sharp tuxedo. His hair was touched with silver at the temples now, but his eyes were as bright and full of love as ever. "My two favorite ladies," he said, his voice warm. "Are we ready for the big night?" The Hayes Family Foundation Gala had become an annual event, raising millions for children's medical research. It was a testament to how far they had come, from Hannah begging for help to save her daughter, to a family dedicated to ensuring no parent ever had to face such desperation again. As they made their way to the event, Hannah's mind drifted back over the years. There had been challenges, of course. Logan's high-profile position had sometimes put a strain on their privacy. Hannah had pursued her degree in social work, balancing studies with family life and her growing role in the foundation. And Elise, as she grew older, had grappled with questions about her biological father and the unique circumstances of her family. But through it all, their love had only grown stronger. Logan had proven to be the father Elise always deserved, his devotion unwavering. Hannah had found her calling in helping other families facing medical crises, and Elise had grown into a compassionate, driven young woman, determined to make a difference in the world. The gala was in full swing when they arrived. As Logan was pulled away to greet some donors, Hannah and Elise made their way through the crowd. Hannah couldn't help but marvel at how confidently Elise navigated the room, chatting easily with guests and charming everyone she met. "Mrs. Hayes," a voice called out, and Hannah turned to see Dr. Patel approaching, a warm smile on his face. "And Miss Elise, my goodness, look at you, a far cry from the little girl I first met all those years ago." Elise beamed, embracing the doctor who had played such a crucial role in her recovery. "It's so good to see you, Dr. Patel. I've been reading about your latest research. It's fascinating." As Elise and Dr. Patel fell into an animated discussion about recent medical advancements, Hannah felt a presence at her side. She turned to find Logan, his eyes shining with pride as he watched their daughter. "Sometimes I still can't believe how lucky we are," he murmured, slipping an arm around Hannah's waist. Hannah leaned into him, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "We've come a long way from that first gala, haven't we?" Logan's arm tightened around her. "I thank my lucky stars every day that you crashed that party," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You and Elise, you saved me in every way a person can be saved." Before Hannah could respond, they were interrupted by the event coordinator, signaling that it was time for Logan's speech. With a quick kiss to Hannah's cheek, He made his way to the stage. As Logan began to speak, his voice filled with passion as he talked about the Foundation's mission, Hannah felt a swell of pride. This was the man she had always known was there, beneath the cold exterior he had once presented to the world, compassionate, driven, and filled with love. And now, Logan was saying, I'd like to introduce someone very special. Many of you know her as my daughter, but tonight she's here as the Foundation's first youth ambassador. Please welcome Elise Hayes. The room erupted in applause as Elise made her way to the stage, her nervousness visible only to those who knew her best. As she began to speak, her voice growing stronger with each word, Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. 16 years ago, I was a very sick little girl, Elise said, her gaze sweeping the room. My mom was ready to do anything to save me. And then a miracle happened, not just in the form of the treatment that saved my life, but in the love that brought our family together. She paused, her eyes finding Hannah and Logan in the crowd. I stand here today not just as a survivor, but as someone determined to pay forward the gift I was given. Every child deserves a chance at life, and every family deserves support in their darkest hours. That's what this foundation is about, and that's what I'm committed to fighting for. As Elise continued her speech, outlining her plans for youth outreach and support programs, Hannah felt Logan's hand slip into hers. She turned to find him watching her, his eyes filled with love and wonder. She's amazing, he whispered, just like her mother. Hannah squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. We did good, didn't we? We did, Logan agreed, pulling her close. And we're just getting started. As the speech ended, and Elise returned to them flushed with excitement and relief, Hannah enveloped her in a tight hug. Over Elise's shoulder, she met Logan's gaze, seeing in his eyes the same overwhelming love and gratitude she felt. Their journey had been far from easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of heartache. But standing here now, surrounded by the fruits of their love and determination, Hannah knew that every struggle had been worth it. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. Elise would soon be off to college, ready to make her mark on the world. Logan and Hannah had plans to expand the Foundation's reach globally. And through it all, their love, for each other and for the family they had built, would continue to be their guiding light. As the gala wound down and they made their way home, Hannah found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a desperate mother willing to do anything to save her child, to a family united by love and dedicated to helping others. Their story wasn't over. There would be new challenges to face, new joys to celebrate. But whatever the future held, Hannah knew they would face it together, stronger for the obstacles they had overcome, and bound by a love that had withstood the test of time. As they stepped into the penthouse, the New York City lights twinkling behind them, Hannah felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was their happily ever after, not a fairy tale ending, but a real ongoing story of love, family, and the power of second chances. Logan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. What are you thinking about? He murmured. Hannah smiled, leaning into his embrace as she watched Elise excitedly recount the evening's events. I'm thinking about how grateful I am, she said softly. For you, for Elise, for every moment that led us here. And I'm thinking about how excited I am for whatever comes next. Logan's arms tightened around her. Whatever it is, he said, his voice filled with love and certainty. We'll face it together, always. As they joined Elise, the sound of laughter filling the penthouse, Hannah knew that truer words had never been spoken. Together they had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. Together they had built a life filled with love and purpose. And together they would continue to write their extraordinary love story one day at a time. The future was bright, full of promise and potential challenges. But with the unbreakable bond of family and the enduring power of their love, Hannah, Logan, and Elise were ready for whatever lay ahead. Their journey was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. And that, Hannah thought as she looked at her husband and daughter, was the most beautiful part of all. Moved by this story? Then get ready to dive into other equally powerful and emotional tales. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and join us in uncovering new perspectives and valuable insights. The stories we share are designed to illuminate paths and spark reflection. Don't wait. The next video is just a click away. See you there.